Hi. The film I will be talking about today is Once Upon a Time in the West. This film was directed by Sergio Leone and stars Charles Bronson, Henry Fonda, Claudia Cardinale, and Jason Robards. Quite a cast. Quite a film. I am an unapologetic fan of Leone. He's one of the few filmmakers that you really can call an artist. Nobody, in my opinion, knew how to do an epic the way Sergio Leone did. And you hear stories about how certain directors and filmmakers can be tyrannical. And I remember watching his film, or Terrence Malick, he comes to mind as well, and thinking if I were an actor, I would put up with anything to be in a film by one of these two gentlemen, because you're gonna look so good on screen, and to be a part of like this beautiful painting that has come to life, and nobody can ever take that from you, and to be able to just sit at home and put it on and say that's me inside of that masterpiece. I would be willing to put up with whatever quirks or eccentricities or volatility that would come along if it's men with this type, or women with this type of talent. What makes this film interesting is Sergio Leone, pretty much you could say, kind of launched Clint Eastwood's career. He had been in Rawhide and done other things, but the spaghetti westerns really made him an icon, on par with somebody like a John Wayne. And when people talk about westerns, I think the two people that come to mind most are Clint Eastwood and John Wayne. I don't think that would be the case without Sergio Leone. And he created a new type of cowboy western hero, of the man of few words, who we knew nothing about. I think it was even called The Man with No Name. And in this film, and I love The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, For a Few Dollars More, those Duck You Sucker, I love all those films. But as far as westerns, this to me is his magnum opus. This is the quintessential western. And again, I don't just love Leone's westerns, the ones that he made. I love the western genre in particular. I love John Ford. I love what Eastwood did with a film like Outlaw Josie Wales. Out of all of them, this, if there was one western somebody was going to watch, I would say to watch this one. The cast, the score by Ennio Morricone, there's not a weak part to this film. And then you have Claudia Cardinale, who is so punishingly beautiful. Every scene that she's in where you see her, you're reminded of how beautiful she is. It's almost like you forgot, and every time you see her, you're reminded. She keeps exceeding expectations. I mean, there's nobody working today whose looks have that kind of charisma. And yet her acting ability, she doesn't have much dialogue in this film. And she is able to emote with just her facial expressions and her eyes. And her beauty is so out of place in this world where such ugliness is taking place. And yet she stands toe to toe with it. She's not overwhelmed by it. And she doesn't seem like a delicate flower in this world. She's tough too. But that toughness has not robbed her of her femininity, of her looks. She still, exudes elegance in a way that not any actress could do. She was perfect for this part. I had never even heard of her until I'd seen this film, and then did a deep dive and found out she'd been in the film 8.5, and I immediately just wanted to know everything I could about her, because it's not just that she's a good, you look at her and you see a star, and you see someone that represents those kind of standards that almost seem unattainable when it comes to the aesthetic. And this film, being an epic film and on such a grand scale, needed the female heroine to be someone of that stature and they found the perfect person with Claudia Cardinale. What this film is about is Cardinale had married this man, McBain, and she's coming from New Orleans where she worked as a prostitute to live with him. And he has this property called Sweetwater where he's going to build this watering tank to service the railroad. He's kind of create his own town there. But if it's not completed by the time the railroad gets there, the property goes back to the rail company. And Morton, the railroad tycoon, he's going to make sure that that happens. So he sends Frank, played by Henry Fonda in the film, to take care of it. And seeing Henry Fonda play a bad guy with no redeemable qualities. I did another Western on this channel, and I talked about it was weird to see John Wayne play somebody who could be conflicted, who had a dark side. This character's all dark. Completely evil. No conflicting thing of, he's got this side to him. He seems to have no conscience. Nothing. And when we first see him on screen, it is so weird to see Henry Fonda carrying out these acts of violence. And there's an interesting story that the script came to Henry Fonda, and it was about playing the heavy in a film. So when he went to meet with Leone, he'd grown a mustache, he put in these brown contacts to hide his blue eyes. When he met him, he's like, no, I want those baby blues. I want Henry Fonda. Because in the film, when we first meet Frank, played by Fonda, the family, the McBain family that's going to try to create this town and for the railroad company, they're having like lunch or picnic. They're gathering outside to eat. The father, the daughter, who's about 16, the oldest boy who's about 18, and the youngest one who's about 9. And as they're outside preparing to eat, all of a sudden we hear a shot. And we see the daughter drop. And we see the father. Then we see the oldest son. Then the little boy comes out and he's seeing this carnage in front of him. And I have to say, he doesn't scream, he really does that well, of that look of just shock of what has happened. And out of the shadow, out of the brush, emerge these ominous looking men in these long coats, and you can't really see their faces. And then all of a sudden that camera zooms in and we realize Henry Fonda is the head of this gang. This man who's played such honorable men like Tom Joad. He even played Abraham Lincoln in a film. He represents the heartland, the Midwest. He's from Nebraska. He's the epitome of decency. He's the everyman. And he's the one at the head of this carnage, the cause of it, who just so ruthlessly murdered this family. And we see those blue eyes that we've always associated with what's good in the world, what's decent, what's honorable. And then we hear, well, what do you want to do, Frank? And he just simply says, seeing as you've told him my name, pistol comes out. Kills a 9-year-old boy. Henry Fonda. That was such a brilliant casting choice by Leone. We don't expect not only has he played those other men that I mentioned, in a John Ford Western, he plays Wyatt Earp. And he's wearing the black hat. And what's so surprising, he wears it well. He's at home in this part. Before this scene takes place, we're at the railroad station. And the tension in the opening sequence builds at such a slow, beautiful pace that the anticipation is everything. And I don't think anybody understood that as well as Leone, to let the moment build. And we see these 3 men out there just waiting. We don't really know what they're waiting for at this point. And there's a scene where one of the guys is sitting there and this fly is buzzing around. He catches it puts it in the gun, kind of listens for a while, would open it, and then just let it go. Another scene where a man is wearing a hat, the water's dripping, he just lets it, and then he takes it, he kind of takes a drink of the water, and we know something's getting ready, something's coming to a head. We just don't know what as of yet. And then the train passes, and we hear this eerie music coming from a harmonica. And it's at this point we're introduced to Charles Bronson, who's just referred to as harmonica in the film. And the men are looking at him. And he was there for an encounter with Frank, but Frank's not there. And he says, did you bring a horse for me? When they see their horses, and they said, no, it looks like we're one short. And then Bronson says, no, I think you brought two too many. Takes them all three out. Bronson, just like how it was an amazing choice to put Fonda as the back, Eastwood was great in the spaghetti westerns. But when you're wanting a character who is shrouded in mystery, I don't think you can do better than Charles Bronson. That very line, I'd say you brought two too many. With the wrong actor, it's hokey, it's generic, it's cliche. But with Bronson, who even in his work, we don't get to hear him talk much, you buy it. And what's so good about Charles Bronson is there is a sadness to him that matches his strength that I really can't think of any other actor that also brought that pathos to being a tough guy in film. And when you watch him, you see his face, you know how tough he is. And at the same time, you know a price was paid for that toughness. And that while we would all like to have that about us, we wouldn't want to go through what he probably had to go through to get there. And we just see that he had to have gone through something. There's something he can just say with that face, with that body language. He's perfect in this film. And we learn throughout the film that Bronson's character, Harmonica, has a preoccupation with Frank, that this is personal to him. And he's kind of like a ghost in the film who keeps appearing. And after we see him gun down the three men, and we then see the McBain family killed by Frank, we meet Claudia Cardinale's character, Jill. And when we first see her on camera getting off the train, and then she finds the man who puts her in the buggy and the horse is taking her there, that scene is so beautiful because Leone lets it unfold. In so many movies today, she'd get off the train, she'd find the person that's going to take her to the McBain ranch, and in the scene would show her getting in the buggy, and then the next scene she's there. Leone doesn't do that. He understands the beauty that can be captured with showing her in the buggy, showing her being taken to the farm, showing the beautiful shots with Ennio Morricone's music accompanying it along the way. And it hit me because now the word slow is used as a pejorative term. And what's sad is so many filmmakers are now catering to viewers with short attention spans. And you can see it. It is cut so fast because they don't want to lose anything in this time where nobody even really watches TV or a movie completely. They have their phone out if they're at home. And they're kind of looking up every so often. You can't afford to lose them, so we've got to keep them stimulated. We got to get from A to B, and we got to get there fast, because if we don't, by the time we get to C, they've already checked out. Leone doesn't do that. He understands that there's such beauty in the little moments with no dialogue. Just let it unfold slowly, quietly, and let us get a feel for the landscape. And Cardinale, even though she's not had no dialogue while she's in the buggy, we see just her, we're kind of watching her look around, taking in the landscape. And she does this so well. And it just really breaks my heart that not enough filmmakers today have the courage to let something unfold. See the beauty in the slow, moments. Let it, naturally happen. But they all seem to have come from that MTV school of editing. And when you see a director who knows how to do it the right way, it reminds you of how much we've lost now with the films that are coming out. And it's on the way to the McBain farm. The man taking there wants to stop off and have a drink. And in this scene, we meet Jason Robards, who plays Cheyenne. And he comes in, and he's got the handcuffs on, and he and Harmonica, Bronson in the bar, have this kind of moment where they stare each other down. And in this encounter that the two have with each other, watching these two men who have been down life's hard road kind of recognize something in the other one, kind of feel each other out, because Robards slides a gun to him. And he looks at him. He eventually has somebody, takes his handcuffs and has somebody in the bar shoot him and take him loose. And he realizes that people are trying to convince Bronson that what happened at the train station were Cheyenne's men. They weren't. And they seem to come to this understanding. And eventually they leave, and again, it doesn't happen quickly, but you would just have to watch it to see the way it unfolds. And eventually, Cardinale Jill gets to the McBain ranch and sees that the family's been murdered. And looking at them out there on these like picnic tables and seeing the dream that she had been promised turn into a nightmare right in front of her. And as she goes into the house and sits on the bed, and it lets us see her mourn. And that's the thing, is this film is an epic. It is of grand stature, but not at the expense of character development, like a lot of it, like Titanic did, where, Billy Zane's character is like something right out of a bad soap opera. And you had Kathy Bates playing Molly Brown that was just like, how hard are we going to have to be hit over the head with the fact that she's kind of lacks sophistication, and this is silly. Was it on an epic scale? Yes. Did the story and the writing, were they up to par? No. But in this one, it is. And then she kind of just takes in what has happened to her, how everything has changed on a dime, how the life that she'd escaped from New Orleans to come here disappeared in an instant. We feel it with her, and we see her absorb it, acknowledge it, and grieve it, just in that house. And what the men that were with Frank did when they murdered, they left something that would put the law on the trail of Cheyenne. And Bronson understands this. Cheyenne knows this. They know what Morton and Frank are doing. They're planning it. And eventually Bronson goes in and is talking with Jill. And they kind of have a tense moment together, and he says, let's go outside. When they go outside, she's going to get water for him, fresh water. And he says, drop when you hear an uncomfortable sound. She said, like what? And he says, like this. And he kills 2 more of Frank's men that had come to kill her. And she knows what she's in for now. And then Frank and Cheyenne kind of come together against this powerful tycoon and Frank. Or excuse me, Cheyenne and Harmonica come together because they have a mutual enemy, Frank and Morton, the railroad company. And there's a great scene on a train where Bronson gets captured. But then Jason Robards, the Shank, comes in and gets him. And watching this, the way it was shot so well, there's a scene where he puts a gun in a boot and makes it look like he's coming in, and then I don't even know how to do that scene justice, but it's really well done. So he gets in, gets him out of there, and they decide to not kill Morton because they know what has happened. He sent Frank on the trail to go get Jill. And by the time they got there, Frank's left with Jill, and he kind of forces himself on, and she sleeps with him because she knows that's the only way to save herself. And we know how uncomfortable she is having to do this, and it's a very eerie scene. You don't see anything. But what makes the scene so eerie is the way that Henry Fonda seems to enjoy how horrific this must be for her. And he likes that. He even says, do you like having the hands on you of the man that killed your husband? And she just kind of puts it out of her head, and she knows she's got no choice other to embrace him. And she's a prostitute. This isn't the first time she's had to sleep with someone who makes her skin crawl. She knows the way of the world. She's not an idealist if she's a realist. And this is just something that she has to do. Dignity's a luxury she can't afford at this moment. And as I said, what's eerie is Fonda knows all of that. But that seems to be part of the allure for him. That she's not enjoying it, which increases his enjoyment. And he bullies her into auctioning off the land so that he can get it at a low price. And as this is getting ready to happen, once again Harmonica shows up out of nowhere with a high bid. And they look at him, and then he shows them that he has Cheyenne with him. There was a $5,000 reward for Cheyenne because they still think he's the one that killed the McBain family. And they take him off, and we know they're in cahoots on this. And Cheyenne leaves with them, and she looks at Harmonica and just says, "I need to go take a bath." She wants to get the filth off of her. And Frank shows up again. Frank, Henry Fonda's character. And they have this kind of tense moment amongst each other about, that was for me. That was my land. That was my progress, my ranch. And as Frank steps outside, he knows eyes are on him. There's men up atop the roofs. And what's happened that we know, because we see earlier in a train scene, Morton, the tycoon, sits down to gamble with some men. He's paying these men. He puts money on the table to kill Frank. He wants him out of the picture. Bronson helps him out, shoots some of them while Fonda's outside kind of looking around, not knowing what's going on, and saves his life. And we see Fonda stare at him and not understand why. What's going on here? And Jill looks at him and says, "You just saved him." And he says, "No, I didn't let them kill him. There's a difference." And Frank knows who sold him out. And she's like, "Those were his own men." And he said they found somebody that would pay him more. And that's where this film kind of deals with capitalism. Morality, there is none. And these men have sold their soul It's all for the highest bidder. Frank goes back to the train. He's going to settle up with Morton, who's just thrown him under the bus. And he sees that all the men are murdered. And then he discovers Morton, who had some type of spinal, like tuberculosis, like he was on these crutches, he couldn't move, and he's face down in the ground suffering. He's not dead. He's trying to move. Fonda sits there and looks at him and finds it amusing. Puts the gun back in. He doesn't want to kill him because he knows he's going to die. He wants him to suffer. He's not going to speed up the process. And we don't see it, but we draw the conclusion that the men that had killed them on that train were Cheyenne. He escaped and he ended up going and killing Morton's men on the train. And then it ends at the ultimate climax. They're all back at the McBain Ranch trying to get this station built, this part of the railway done, so that Sweetwater will stay with her. She will make the profit. It will be what McBain intended it to be. They're going to see this through. And once again, Frank emerges. Harmonica's there. Cheyenne shows up, goes in with Jill, and they're kind of having this conversation. And it's eerie because they both know things have come to a head outside. Frank and Harmonica are finally gonna have it, one-on-one, mano-a-mano. And Frank has always been trying to figure out, who are you? And every time he would ask him who he is, he just gives him a name of somebody he's killed. Frank can't understand that, and he doesn't understand where's your preoccupation with me, because he understands this seems personal to you. What's your dog in this fight? I don't get it. Slowly in the film, we start to see Harmonica have these flashbacks. And we see this shadowy figure that continues to emerge and on walk, but we can't make out who he is, and we see him as a boy grimacing, and this figure just and then as they're about to have their duel, their shootout, it becomes apparent to us what has happened. The man, the shadowy figure, is Frank. And years ago, when Bronson Harmonica was a boy, Frank had his brother on his shoulders with a noose under his brother's neck. And Frank's doing everything Bronson's doing everything to stay upright, because when he falls, his brother dies. He'll drop, he's no longer keeping him up, and he dies. And that's the kind of sadistic man Frank was. And when we see his face emerge in that flashback, a younger looking Henry Fonda, and as the boy's standing there, grim, and he takes a harmonica out and shoves it in Bronson, the younger version of Bronson's mouth. And then he finally drops and his brother hangs. We now know why this was personal. And they go for their pistols. Bronson beats him to the punch. He doesn't die quick, and as he looks up and says, "Who are you?" he just takes the harmonica and shoves it in his mouth. And then he drops. He then goes back, and Cheyenne and he leave. They're not the type that stay. And that's kind of part of the whole Western myth. The cowboy rides away. They don't stay. You can only love them from afar. And we see Claudia Cardinale look at him as he's standing there. And she just says, "I hope one day you come to Sweetwater again." And he's kind of, "I'd like to." And he's off. And then as they're going along, we find that Cheyenne Robards, in that encounter on the train, was wounded. and he ends up passing away. So once again, Harmonica has lost someone close to him. We sense that he had the affection for Jill, but it just can't happen. He and Cheyenne kind of by default developed this friendship. Now he's gone. And then we see her go out, coffee for the men that are working on the railroad, and we see this beautiful shot, and we know that she's going to see her husband's dream to fruition. And we see Bronson riding off on his horse with Cheyenne's body draped over his. And then we just see the tagline, Once Upon a Time in the West. Now this video that I've done is longer than some I do. And what's funny is I have not even gotten close to scratching the surface of how great of a film this really is. That's the difficulty with doing stuff like this, is you kind of don't even want to talk about films like this because you run into the thing of I can't do it justice. There's no way to truly capture with words what a beautiful, epic love letter to the Western genre this film is. But it deserves to be talked about. So I just decided to get over it, and even though there's no way I can fully do it justice with a work of art this special, that is actually very underappreciated, because when you hear talks of Great West, this one doesn't get mentioned like it should. And I'm very grateful that I got to see it. And when you see something like this, you just can't help but not want to get on a soapbox and advocate about it. And that's what I'm doing now. Trust me, even if you've listened to this entire thing that I've said so far and haven't clicked through or anything, you're in. If you've never seen this before, even with me giving away certain plot point, you're in for a treat if you watch this film. It is not just a film you watch, it's almost a film you absorb. So, with all that said, please watch this film. You'll be glad that you did. Until next time, thanks.